Hello friends, and welcome to the first of the corncob pipe modification videos. Today we're going to be modifying this Missouri Meerschaum Country Gentleman, and the main work that we're going to be doing is removing the stem insert, or well, the shank extension that goes into the bowl here, which we talked about in the intro video, and filling in the bottom of this with some pipe mud to sort of bring the bottom up to the level of the draft hole and provide us with a nice central entry point of the draft hole into the tobacco chamber, which just should improve the smoking quality of this a bit, make it more consistent with what you would expect from briar, and help avoid any flavor that might come from the burning of that wooden shank extension, which will burn over time as you smoke the pipe if you don't remove it. Now, as I've said in the previous video, there's absolutely no reason that you have to do this. These pipes smoke just fine as is, but it's one of the things you can do pretty easily just to improve the quality a bit, and let's face it, it's kind of fun. So to do that, there's a couple of ways you could go about it. I mean, you could imagine getting some sort of a Dremel bit with a long arm down in there and just kind of grinding away at that piece. Ideally, it would be nice if you could just kind of mark it with a pencil and then pull this out, but it turns out that these are glued in quite well. And I'm not sure what the glue is, but I've tried both heat and steam to break it down, and I haven't been able to get these loosened. So I'm not sure if there's an easier way to do it. But basically removing this to cut it isn't an option. What I prefer to do is a little bit slower than some power tool method, but it works, and it's kind of a relaxing thing. And I just go at it with chisels and carving tools. So the main tools that I use is I believe this is a 1/4-inch chisel, very sharp 1/4-inch chisel that I can get down in there, and that helps me get off some of the bigger bits. And then I've got an assortment of these flex cut carving tools, and these are extremely sharp. They're sold by companies like Woodcraft, and they come in different profiles. So you've got let's see if we can show you the profile there. You got a nice sort of sweeping curve. Here's a more of a tight radius. That will focus. Yes, more of a tight sort of radius to this curve, and then we've got a sharper angle for getting into corners. These are extremely sharp, and to give you an idea of how sharp they are, the company actually includes a little packet of Band-Aids with each purchase. So I haven't had to use these yet, but it's sort of a nice warning and thought. All right, so the first thing we're going to do then is we're going to remove that wooden plug. And to do that, I am just going to start by taking this sharp chisel, and I'm going to try to show you as much of this as I can. I'm going to place it, right along the edge of that wood. It's really hard because I'm blocking the light as I come in. But I'm going to be working on these parts that are sticking up more and just chiseling those down. So and you can see it's pretty easy to start breaking off fairly large chunks of that. So a sharp chisel is a good thing. We've got, I don't know if my light is going to actually help much or not here, but we got that pretty well compressed down, and then I'll just grab something I can turn this out onto. So there's the little bits of wood that came out. And now what we will do is we'll go in there with the finer tools and just begin to try to get rid of what remains of that. So, picked up the wrong guy there. This one is nice because the radius pretty much fits the edge, and you can just kind of slowly work your way around. Again, more stuff. And we really want to get to the point where we have eliminated that wood, and we're down to the hardwood plug, which is way down at the bottom there. So we're getting there. We've taken the top off, and it's just a matter of slowly chipping away at that bottom piece. So I'm going to work on that using these tools, and I will be back when it's done. So it occurred to me as I was chopping away inside the tobacco chamber that you probably can't really see what I'm doing, and you know, that's not a surprise really. There's not enough room to get the light, the camera, and the tool down into the tobacco chamber. So I made some drawings that I hope are going to make this a little bit more clear, and hopefully also allow me to better explain the choice of tools that I'm using. So first off, this is meant to be a view of looking down into the pipe, into the tobacco chamber. And hopefully you were able to see, when I didn't have a tool in there, that we have this shank extension. This is the cob, so this circle is the walls of the cob. And this shank is actually extending into to the center of the tobacco chamber. This dotted line indicates the draft hole that's drilled through the shank. And that draft hole is actually exposed here because this has been cut away at an angle. And I have here a shank that's actually from a pipe that's been smoked. So this is one that I decided to modify later on after I had already smoked it. So it's a bit difficult to see the contrast here. But let me zoom in a bit, and I'll put a bit of extra light on that and see if I can. So you see, that is the draft hole right there. If I turn this on end and put the light underneath it, you can see so the draft hole is coming straight through there, and this has been cut at an angle right here, which is going to expose the top of that draft hole. And that's sort of where the draft hole would typically exit the tobacco chamber in a briar pipe, right here. But in a corncob pipe, that's actually being formed by this extension of the shank. So this right here is representing this little, oh sorry, so this extension of the shank is forming the end of the draft hole. And this right here is meant to indicate that region that's exposed by this angled cut across the top of the shank. So I hope that's making a bit more sense now. What we're trying to do is to remove this part here and just leave enough inside the walls of the cob to keep the shank secure. So basically, if this is sitting in here, we're going to be cutting off everything forward of the cob. So all of this is going to be removed. Now if we look at that from the side, let me zoom out a bit more. Drawing's not to scale, of course. So if we look at that from the side, these hashed lines are meant to indicate the walls of the cob. And again, we have this shank extension coming through the walls of the cob. This area is representing the cutout region. And here you can see the draft hole represented by these dotted lines, which is being exposed right here by the cut. So we're trying to remove this part. Now the way these are made, and it's a good thing because it wouldn't be very stable otherwise, the grain is running in this direction along the shank. So that's going to make it resistant to being snapped off, obviously. So when this is in place and we're trying to cut through these fibers, we're actually going to be coming straight down and cleaving through the grain. So this is basically end grain. If we wanted to make a paring cut, we would have to be coming in this direction, you know, parallel to the grain. We're actually making a cut across the grain. And that's one of the reasons why the sharpness of the tool is so critical. So if we just think of this as a chisel, which it's obviously not, but what we're doing is we're basically bringing this straight down, cutting through the grain. And the way I'm doing it is I push until I feel that it's not going to push any further, and then I actually twist the chisel. And what that's doing is it's kind of chipping out little pieces as I go down. So, you know, I'll get this far, I'll twist it, and this section right here where I've cut the grain will pop out. And then I can push a little bit further and twist it, and so on. So I'm using, you know, the initial thing that I use is this chisel, which it is a 1/4 inch chisel. And it's nice and sharp. It's one of my woodworking tools that I keep sharp for other reasons, but it works really well at being able to cut through that end grain and then pop off the pieces as I go down. And then I'm using these flex cut tools to get more of a profile around the edges of the cob. So for filling in around here, around here, the curve lets me mimic that curve of the wall of the cob. Now, do you need to run out and buy a chisel and a flex cut tool? No. You could do this with, if you have chisels, that's great. Any chisel, as long as it's sharp, is going to work. So you might need to sharpen, and you might need to sharpen it often if it's not a high quality tool, because it will not hold the edges well. So any yard sale chisel is probably going to do the job. Even a screwdriver that you sharpen on a grinder and then use some sandpaper to kind of hone it should be giving you a sharp enough edge that you'd be able to do this. This is not fine woodworking. We're basically hacking away a piece of wood to get it out of the tobacco chamber. And we're going to fill the entire area that we're exposing. We're exposing new wood. That's going to be covered with pipe mud. So even if you do a lousy job and it's raggedy around the edges, it's still going to be okay. And at worst, you're going to have a fiber or two of wood that's going to burn away the first time you smoke the pipe. So this is not fine woodworking. You don't need to go out and buy expensive tools to do it. A cheap chisel, a sharp screwdriver. If you want to invest in these, I think a set of 4 of these was probably $50, $60. It's been a long time since I bought them. I don't know. So if you want to go that route, they've got other uses. If you're a woodworker, you might want to have tools like this. But if you don't, and you just want to sharpen up a screwdriver and give it a try, you don't have a lot to lose. Alright, so we were able to pretty quickly complete this. It only took less than 5 minutes really. And you can see here that we have removed that wooden insert completely. And let me take, this is a 13/64 drill bit, which just happens to fit the draft hole on this pipe perfectly. And what I've done is I put that, as I was getting towards the end, I put that through and just used it as a sort of backing plate to run the sharp ends of these flex cut tools along and take off any fibers that were sort of hanging out around the draft hole. Not that important. They would probably burn up pretty quickly the first time you smoke the pipe, but just to be neat, I wanted to trim those off. And that shows you that the air hole is still open. There's no issue there. But you also hopefully can see that that drill bit is riding up above the bottom by a fair amount. So we need to bring that bottom up, and that's what we're going to be using the pipe mud for. Before we do that, though, I'd like to do a little bit of work on the interior of this bowl, just clean it up a bit. And for that, the easiest thing to do is just good old sandpaper. And unfortunately, this is going to take some time because I want to get rid of the stain. I want to basically bring this all back down to, well, if it was a pipe, if it was a briar pipe, I'd say I want to bring it back down to bare briar, but now I'm just trying to bring it back down to bare cob. So I'm going to start with a fairly aggressive 80 grit sandpaper, and I'm just going to fit this in there with my finger and start doing this. And I'll be doing this for some time because, as you can see, it's not quickly wearing away. The cob itself is actually quite durable. So I will do this off camera, and I will come back to you once the bowl is cleaned out and ready for the pipe mud. So lest you miss out on any of the action, I've got the 80 grit sandpaper in the chamber, and I've been doing this for about 10 minutes. So I've mercifully saved you from having to watch that. And as you can see, we're getting there. There is some staining here that, if you look closely, you can see it's starting to kind of outline the shape of the cob, or the shape of the kernels, or the roots of the kernels here. We're not going to get rid of that. That's pretty deep, and I'm not going to try to get rid of that. I've sanded this about as much as I want to with the 80 grit. It's, you know, relatively smooth. I think we got a nice tobacco chamber there now. So what I'm going to do is just finish this up to, I don't know, maybe 220 or so. We don't have to be crazy about it. Get that all fully smooth, and then I'll come back and show you the pipe mud. All right, so all in all, that took about maybe 15 minutes. Not the most fun you can have, but it wasn't difficult, and you know it's worth the effort. Of course, you're doing this for fun, not to be quick. So spend some time sanding. It's relaxing. It has a nice zen-like quality to it. So we've sanded that out as best we can. Like I said, some of that stain is penetrating deeply enough that I don't see the point of really going after it. After the first smoke, this is all going to darken and carbonize, and you're not going to know it's there, and it doesn't affect the flavor at all. So I'm really just playing with aesthetics at this point. So the next stage, well, let me just make a point here. This does generate a lot of fine dust when you're sanding this. I have no idea what the health qualities are of corncob dust. I'm guessing there's nothing good about breathing it in. So if you're going to do a lot of this, you might want to wear a respirator just to be safe. And when I was done, and I do this often with things, I just took a little can of this, spray air that's sold. You can get it at Radio Shack for dust removal. It's very handy to have around the shop. And I just blew out the stem and blew out the tobacco chamber just to make sure I got all of that dust out of there. Just because I don't want to suck up a bunch of dust the first time I smoke the pipe. Okay, so now we need to bring that bottom up, because as you can see, this is entering above the bottom of the tobacco chamber right now. And that means that we would have a lot of tobacco sitting down here that would never combust, because it's only going to combust where the oxygen is being pulled through. And that's going to be limited to this area above the draft hole. So we want to raise the bottom up to the level of the draft hole, and then we want to put something through here to bring that draft hole into the center of the chamber, or approximately the center of the chamber. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to use a mixture that's known as pipe mud, and pipe mud's a really useful stuff. It's really simple too. So if you're a cigar smoker, you've got an unlimited quantity of pipe mud. All that it is ash from a cigar, and this is, I keep this jar around in the summertime when I sit out on the back porch and smoke cigars. I tap the ash into this instead of tapping it into an ashtray, and then break up the ash so that it's a nice fine mesh, I guess you would say, and just keep it, and it lasts. I have not had any of this go bad, so you can keep it as long as you want. And it is combined with a number of things, actually. So if you read various internet posts about pipe mud, some people swear that the only way to make it is to mix the ash with saliva. I don't like to mix the ash with saliva for reasons I've discussed before. I just don't like spitting and things. But if you want to try that, it's fine. People suggest using things like honey, sour cream. There's all sorts of things you can use. I have settled on a very simple water, distilled water in this case. I use distilled water because sometimes I make these and send them to other people, and I don't know what people are sensitive to. I don't know what's in my tap water, although I drink it all the time. I think it's perfectly safe. But just to avoid putting anything in there that I don't know about, I go with the distilled water, which is going to be 99% pure water. Now you can use pipe mud for things other than corn cobs, and it really is useful if you're playing around with estate pipes. Sometimes you'll get a pipe that has what's called spider webbing inside, so you'll see these fine cracks going around the inside of the pipe. It's actually in the briar, not in the cake. Sometimes you'll see that there's a little bit of burnout starting on the bottom of the bowl. Or sometimes you'll get a pipe that's just poorly drilled, and like what we have here, which was not poorly drilled, it's just a different design that we're modifying. But like what we have here, the draft hole may come up above the bottom of the tobacco chamber. So pipe mud can be used in all those situations on a briar pipe, and really save a pipe from being trash. Turn it into a good smoking pipe, or save it from burning out. In the case of the spider webbing or some fissures in the chamber, Putting a layer of pipe mud over that will prevent those from being a spot that can seed burning and eventually lead to a burnout through the side of the chamber. So it's a really useful technique to have in your toolbox, and it's simple. So you got to collect some ash. Now, on the ash, cigar ash is the thing that you see most commonly used, and it's the only thing that I use. I've not tried other things. I've seen some people posting that just wood ash from a fireplace, as long as you sift it and make sure that you just have the fine ash, will work. I've also seen people suggest that pipe ash can also be used. Again, you have to sift out the dottle and any unburnt tobacco. You just want very fine ash. Because I'm a cigar smoker and, you know, one cigar gives me enough for several pipes, I just collect this up and use it, and that works fine. This is just the bottom of a plastic Dixie cup that I've cut off just to give me something to mix it in. And I will take a fairly liberal amount of ash. The ash will, the volume will reduce as we wet this. So I'm going to take a fair amount here because we do have a large space to fill. Let's start with that and see how we go. And just check through that, make sure there's not any big chunks or anything. Looks good. These baby food jars are fantastic for a lot of things. We don't have children, but my wife makes dog treats for our dogs, and she uses some baby food in that. I don't know what the recipe is, but I get the jars. Okay, so we got that. Now, the amount of water that you add is really important. You don't want to turn this into a runny mixture. This has got to be very coarse and solid, and all I can say is that you know what it looks like when it's done. So I'm going to zoom in a bit here, and I'll show you how I mix this. Now, the texture I'm going for is the one that works for me, and I suggest you try to mimic this. I kind of go until it starts to get grainy and form like clusters. It's hard to describe, it's easier to see, but add very little water to start and add water as you need it. And of course, if you overshoot, you can always add more ash. So I'm going to add just a drop or two of water. And that's probably much less than we need, but we'll start with it. And you've got to be patient with this. It's better to add too little than too much. You see how that's starting to form? Now, of course, we got a lot more ash to mix in there, but that's kind of the texture I'm looking for throughout this whole mixture, is to get these sort of big chunks in there. And this has got to be some of the most interesting video you've seen today, huh? Will he add more water or will he stop? And as it starts to come together, as I push on it, you'll see it'll pack. Now this is still a little bit dry, but we're getting there. We're getting very close. The odd thing about this, and I don't understand the chemistry, I'd like to, it forms a solid rock when it's dry. It takes a couple of days for it to dry fully, and that's one of the reasons why you don't want to really overshoot with the water, because it will be much harder for it to set up, and I don't know if it will ever set up. So we just shoot for the right texture right off the bat. Let's see, that's very close. I'm just going to go a couple more drops. And there's probably a range here that I've hit, so probably another drop or two won't hurt anything. Probably a drop or two less won't hurt anything, but this is about what we're looking for. As you can see, it's got that sort of coarse texture to it. When I push on it, it forms easily and stays together. Oops. Yeah, that's what I'm looking for. Now, you can buy this if you want. Aristocob sells it. I've not purchased it from them, but I'm sure, knowing Scott, it's a top quality product and it works just well. It's still a little dry. I'm going to add just a bit more water. It's almost there, it's just not sticking together exactly the way I like it to. Yeah, so you can buy a container of pipe mud from Aristocob, and that might be a good option if you're not a cigar smoker and you want to do this. You can experiment with other ashes if you want. And if you want to experiment with things like honey or sour cream, you know, go ahead. I've seen some pretty odd mixtures that people use, both as bowl coatings and as repair materials, and you know, you try it. That's the whole point of this hobby. There are no rights and wrongs, just things you try and experiments that fail and experiments that succeed. Okay, so now the surprisingly easy part is that we're just going to go ahead and pour this into the bowl. Let me zoom out a bit so you can see me pouring it in. Before I zoom in, just one more time, let me show you what I'm looking at here. It's the way this kind of will form together and stay together. And the fact that when I break it up, it stays very granular. That's the texture that I want, and this is just about perfect. So let me zoom out. Oops. Someday I'm going to figure out which direction is in and which direction is out. And let's move that out of the way for now. And now I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to put this into the bowl. Just try to funnel it in as best I can. Oops. All came out in one chunk, of course. Now we probably have a lot more in there than we need, but that's okay. It's not hard to remove it. Let's just stop that there for now. And now we'll start to tamp this down a bit. And you can see we've got a fair amount there in the bottom. We're not packed in tightly, so I'm going in with my finger, and I'm trying to keep it from accumulating along the walls as I push it down and start to really pack it tightly. You could use a tamper for this if you want. I find that my finger just gives me a bit more feel for what I'm doing. So I can make sure that it's smooth on the bottom and that it's kind of forming to the edges of the bowl. I want to sort of form a dish at the bottom if I can. There we go. So let's see if we can get you a shot of that. So we got a nice tightly packed bottom there. Now where is that relative to the draft hole? Well, we're going to take advantage of our friend, I believe this was 13/64, is that right? Yeah, I think it's 13/64 drill bit that fits this draft hole quite nicely. And we'll actually put it in with the pointy side in, and I'm going to just go ahead and turn that, hopefully so that we can both see it going in. And I'm going to push it into the chamber, and now you can see it's starting to push up the pipe mud a bit. You see that little divot that's forming there? So that's telling me where the drill bit is relative to the bottom. So what I'll do now is I'll go in with this little spatula that I have, and you could use anything you want really, and I'm just going to move that away, tip out the excess, and let's see what we got. There, can you see the point of the drill bit coming through in there? Hopefully you can catch that little bit of shiny. So now I'm going to pull the drill bit back out, knock off the pipe mud off the end, and I'm going to put it in with the non-pointy side, just to force through that mud and give me something to shoot for in terms of how I'm going to form the hole at the bottom of the chamber. So you can see we're not there yet. We still got some sculpting to do. So now we'll go back in with the spatula, and I'm basically just carving away the mud over that drill bit. Now you can see where the bit is. And I'm going to keep doing that now. And I know you can't see what I'm doing. I apologize, but I need to be able to see what I'm doing in order to show you how it looks. And I'd like to move that in just a little bit more. Trying to get it centered. There we go. I'll tip out the excess mud that I've scraped away. And let's see if I can get some light down in there. So there you can see that that little drill bit is pretty well centered in the chamber. I'm going to inch that forward just a little bit more before I call it done. And saying so, he immediately goes too far. That's okay. It's forgiving. Yeah, so that looks very good. So you can see I now have that pretty well centered. There's still just a little bit of mud above it that I want to clean up and just kind of sculpt into a smooth bottom. So let me work on that for a second. And again, going back in with my finger, because the nice thing about using your finger is it's very sensitive and you can feel any imperfections, and we'd like this to be as smooth as possible. Yeah, that looks very good to me. So that's what we're looking at. There's a little tiny spot on, let's see, that would be on the right-hand side, right next to the drill bit, that I'd like to fill in. You probably think I'm crazy, but I'm going to go ahead and try to put a little bit more mud back in there just to fix that spot. I'm a perfectionist. And you know what they say about perfection? It's the enemy of good enough. And I've proven that time and time again. So I filled that spot in, and in the process I've covered it up a bit more, so I need to just carve it out again. There we go. I think that looks pretty good. So I'll do one more run of my finger in there just to kind of smooth things out a bit. One last check. Very happy with that. Now we will pull out the drill bit. And you can see what we're left with is a bit of a cavity, which is reasonable because we had a three-dimensional object in there and we've only exposed the top of it, so the sides of that lower chamber that we've created now are going to be a bit curved, but that's okay. That locates our tobacco chamber quite well. The top edges of that are going to be brittle, and the first time we pack the pipe they're going to break, and that's okay. We'll just let that happen. But for now, this is done. We're gonna let this set now. And the setting up of this, I would let it go a minimum 2 days before I considered it no longer fragile. I would probably let it sit for at least a week before I would try to smoke it. That's me being extremely cautious. The 2 days is probably more than enough. You want it to dry out enough that it becomes solid, and I obviously think that in 2 days' time it will be solid. And then as you smoke it, obviously it's going to heat up, and that heat is going to drive off any extra moisture. So we should not really have any issues after 2 days, but just to be safe, I like to give it about a week. And one of the things that I do, just to sort of keep track of things or to provide me with a test, is I take all this extra mud and pack it down in this, and I'll just keep this by the side, and I'll know that when this is hard, then what's in there is very likely hard, and we'll be ready to smoke. So that's it. That is the basic way that I modify the internals of the tobacco chamber on the Missouri meerschaum cobs. In this case, a country gentleman, but the same process can be used for any cob pipe. The main benefits of this are that it gets rid of that wooden insert that does burn as you're smoking, so you don't have that burned wood flavor any longer. And it raises the tobacco chamber to the correct height, or it raises the draft hole rather, to the correct height and places it in the correct location for optimal combustion of the tobacco. I think it improves the smoking quality, not dramatically, but it's an easy enough thing to do. If I wasn't videoing this, it would have probably taken 15 or 20 minutes to do this. And now we just let it sit for a few days and pop the bit back on, and she's ready to smoke. So I hope you enjoyed this. I hope that you, at least if nothing else, can take away from this the pipe mud procedure and can use that on any pipe now. And I hope that you pick up a Missouri Meerschaum corncob pipe and give this a try, because you'll have some fun doing it, and it really does add to the smoking pleasure. So in the next video, we're going to be looking at how to replace the plastic stem on the Missouri Meerschaum with a vulcanite stem. And I hope you'll tune in for that. And until then, I hope you all take care. Thank you for liking or commenting on the video. And if you're not a subscriber and you'd like to keep up with both the corncob pipe modifications in the coming videos, as well as all my briar pipe restorations and other ramblings, please hit the subscribe button. I'd love to have you amongst the subscribers here. So until next week, take care, be well, and I will look forward to talking to you again soon. Bye now.